Okay, so terminal 9 and 10. So you can put a meter in here. So you measure resistors across those two ports here. Okay. So then you can separate. You can remove those two wires from the cage. So you're measuring resistance only on those two here. Okay. So these two wires here is your connection to the base system, so they possibly come here. You see the same in the identification, so the same wire into this block. So you measure resistance across those two, so you disconnect those two and then you're measuring resistance of the base assembly here, the motor controller engine side. And if you disconnect those two wires on this side, on the left hand side, if you remove those two and you measure resistance across here, but you connect them to back in, you're measuring everything what's on the cage. Okay. My meter in, so all the wires are connected. Machine is off, no power on the system, because if the voltage is present on a CAN line, it's not possible to measure resistance. So what I have now, I have 60 ohms. Okay, and that's the way it should be, because we have a termination at the motor controller, and the next one, 120 ohm termination, is in the cage. So what I will do now, I will remove these two wires, because this set of wires here, they're all coming from the cage. So I will remove these two wires and I will be measuring resistance on the side, this side of the machine, on the base of the machine. And I will measure resistance across those two wires, which is going to be resistance in a cage. So we should have 120 ohms on those two wires when they're removed. Okay, so remove the wires. So they're removed. That's the cage end. They're coming from the cage. So I still have the meter number 9 and 10 as before. So before we had the 60, now we have 120 ohms. Okay, 120 ohms, that's what you should have. And that 120 ohms comes from the motor controller. Okay, so I have motor controller here. And if I disconnect this plug, the resistance is gonna go up. And it's gonna be much higher. Okay, let's try to do that. Okay, so I disconnect the motor controller. So I still have the CAN bus wire going into this plug here, into this diesel box, over this wire and the plug underneath. Let's see if I get some light on. Yeah. So this wire, okay, brings the CAN bus connection from the base control box into this diesel box, and from the diesel box into this cable and the motor controller. Okay, so now resistance should be much higher than before. So nothing has changed here, but resistance now is 10 kilo ohms. Okay, so we know nothing is wrong here. Okay, so we don't have the problems at the base, everything's okay here. So now I fit these wires back into terminal 9 and 10, and I removed those two wires. This is opposite side of terminal, so it was connected. Not sure if you can see it from there, but they've been connected right there. Okay, here. So I still have my meter in the same place, disconnected from the terminals, and I'm measuring resistance between 9 and 10, and now I'm having 120 ohms. So what I'm reading now, actually resistance across those two wires, and they're coming from the cage. So I have a termination in the cage, 120 ohms. Okay, so these two wires here, kind of high, kind of low. This terminal, I think 7 and 8, is our CAN bus wire. That's where we're measuring resistance at the base on these two, and the termination is this here. This is resistor termination resistor. So if I remove this resistor here, okay, so now so you see that's changed. So now I have 111 kilo ohms. Okay, so if you have anything less than 60 ohms, close to 10 ohms or something, or 20 ohms, so that's most likely there is a short circuit somewhere in the CAN bus. And what you can try to do, try to disconnect the wires, try to eliminate on which part of the machine the problem is.